Good morning. I just want you to know that we made a few changes to the program, just two. In fact, Joaquin Unger will be speaking in this room in this morning, and Raymond will speak about QGs in the afternoon on the other room. So there are two presentations, two changes to the program. But let's start with our invited speaker, Victor Olaya. Thank you very much for coming. And Victor is a well-known contributor and well-known person in our community, and we are really glad that you have been able to come and to join us. So please.
Cool. Thank you. So yeah, thanks to the organization as well for inviting me. Really happy to be here. I'm going to be making a small presentation, like a kind of philosophical presentation about the importance of knowledge and of good education and knowing what we're doing with our GIS. This is what I've called here being a better GIS professional and how we can help other people become better GIS professionals, right? So for those of you that don't know me, I'm basically a GIS developer, and if I have to select from my career, like the two highlights, let's say, of my career, the two most important things I've done, one of them would be the processing toolbox. In case you're familiar with QGIS, this is the entry point for all the analysis in QGIS. I created that 5 or 6 years ago, I don't remember right now. That I would say is probably the most important hit in my career. But I've done other things apart from development in the world of GIS. And there's another thing I'm really proud of is this book, which is, as far as I know, the only free book about GIS theory. It's a book that you can copy, sell, modify, like a free book, like an open source book. This picture was posted to Twitter by one of my readers. It's the book on a weight scale, saying that this book is 1.5 kilos of knowledge. And you can see it's a pretty big book. It's almost 1,000 pages. I did a lot of work on that. And the book is pretty popular, and there's now a shorter version in both the Spanish and English. So with these two things, you can say that I've probably been doing two things in the world of GIS. One is providing useful tools for GIS professionals, having that platform for analysis. And the other thing that I've been doing is like teaching, right? I've done some training courses, but also with this book, people read the book and people learn GIS, right? It's something that I actually like a lot to teach other people. But I believe that I've not only been teaching people with my book or with the training things that I do, but also with my work as a developer, right? I think we are in the open source world, we are in a community, and everything we do in the community affects other people. And that means that when we do something, we actually teaching other people, or we help other people become better professionals. We might do that correctly, or we might do that wrongly, right? So this is what I'm going to be talking about. As I said, the importance of knowledge, or of knowing and understanding what you're doing in GIS, but also how we can teach other people, we can help other people become better GIS professionals, not just by doing things that we might classify as training or learning, like writing a book or doing a training course, but also in everything we do in the community, and starting from my main job, which is actually coding, programming, right? So let me start with a quote. This comes from FOSS4G Barcelona. This was from one of the keynote presentations. And at that time, we had already OpenStreetMap, but it was not such a big thing. And a conference like that, like FOSS4G, was really targeted at software, right? And then came this keynote speaker and said, hey, yeah, it's fine. You are focusing on the software, but don't focus exclusively on the software. Because data is also important. And you have to focus on data. We have great software, but we don't have great data. That is not useful, right? Your software is awesome, but it's useless without data. That's what he was saying. And I completely agree with that. I think it's really true, right? But I feel that it's half the truth, right? It's not a complete truth, because it just moves the problem from the software to the data, right? We are not going to focus so much on the software, like having great software, and we think that is going to solve all our problems. We move to data, but that kind of we're in the same situation, right? Because this is not the complete thing, right? I'm going to use a metaphor to change that. I've used this slide in another talk. Probably you've seen that. see me doing some talks, but I like this metaphor. David and Goliath, everyone knows this story, right? David is small, but he's smart, and he defeats Goliath because he uses a sling. So that's the moral of the story. And to see that, let's analyze this. What happens in here? What are the elements in this fight that explain what happens, right? The first one of them, of course, you would say is the sling, right? It's the first thing you think about it. Okay, yeah, David has this sling. That's the reason why he wins. He's smart, and he uses that. This is what we can say is the software, right? Software and hardware, maybe. But it's like the tool that he's using, right? It's a tool that he uses as a weapon. And, of course, a sling might be awesome, but it's useless if you don't put anything into it. It's useless if you don't put stone in it, right? We have the sling, we have the stone, and the stone, obviously, is like the data. That's what you use to feed your tool that you have there. So if we stop in here, if we just focus on, having a great sling and having a great stone, we're still in the same problem, because there's a third ingredient, there's the third thing that is more important than both of the other ones, and we usually forget. The third element, if you can figure out, it's aim, right? If you don't have aim, if you don't know how to use that, you can have the best sling, you can have the best stone, there's no way you can win that, right? But this is the most important thing, to train, to learn how to use a sling, and then, okay, it's better if you have a good sling and if you have a good stone, but the most important thing is the know-how, right? Having good aim and knowing how to use it, right? So this is basically what we try to have as well in any discipline, but especially in the case of GIS, right? Let's not focus so much on the data or the software, which are very important, like in a conference like this one, we're discussing about software, about data, but also focus on, being, as I said, good GIS professional people that actually understand what they are doing and have the know-how that is needed, right? We can rephrase that quote from the PhosphoGeo like that. Your software and your data are awesome, but they're useless without knowledge, right? We have to know what we're doing, and most of the time we forget about that, right? We just not think about that so much. Anyway, what I'm going to try to do now is to let's see how we can go in that direction, how we can guide people to become better GIS professional and get more knowledge instead of just focusing on having a better software or a better data, right? Here's one tip that I would give to you if you are a software developer. What to do to get that, to make better GIS professional. It's let's make software less easy to use, right? And I'm going to propose a couple of things here in like a provocative way, right? But I'm not saying that we have to make software, we have to focus on making our software less easy to use, but also we shouldn't focus on making it easy to use, like per se, like, this is a goal. Let's make our software easy to use. Software has to be efficient, software has to be effective, intuitive, robust, many things, but not necessarily easy to use, right? Or, this is something good, but it's not something that we should focus on that, like, with so importantly. Why? But basically, because easiness is not a substitute for knowledge, right? And what we try when we do something easy to use is just making it more accessible for people that don't have the knowledge to use the non-easy to use version. Right? And this is not a good idea. We have to make it easy to use for people that already know what is needed. I like to think about a programming software, the kind of software that we, the programmers, use to write our software. There's a big difference between using a text editor and using a programming ID, right? You have auto-completion, you have syntax checking, you have a lot of things that make your life easier, right? So it's easier to program with that. But in the end, you must know programming. There's no way that using the most advanced environment for programming, you're going to be able to create a software if you don't know how to create a loop, if you don't know about data structures, all the kind of things that programmers, we know, right? So you need to know the language, you need to know the programming stuff, and then you have the tool that makes life easier for you. And this is what we should try to get also when we are developing software for GIS, right? Making it easier for people, or making it more efficient for people that actually know what they're doing, but not try to mask the complexity and replace the need to know what you're doing with just, something that is easy to use and is, that you believe that you understand what's going on in there. Oh, this is a quote from Rick Cook. It's a 20-year-old, 20-year-old book, but it's still, it makes sense now. I'm going to read because you don't see the last part. So programming is a race between software engineers striving to build bigger and better idiot-proof programs, and the universe trying to produce bigger and better idiots. And what you can see is so far the universe is winning, right? So this is the quote, and I believe this is still true today. This is, as I said, this comes from a book by a writer called Rick Cook, written more than 20 years ago. And what we're trying to do here, like this is true, and how are we fighting this? Well, what we're trying to do is to build better idiot-proof programs, because all this idea of easy to use, in the end, as we usually use it, as we usually approach that, easy to use is just an euphemism for idiot-proof, right? And this is not the good way, I think, of doing things. We are trying to create better idiot-proof software, but instead, what we should try to do is, all these people that idiots, and probably this is not a very politically correct word, but I keep the phrasing of the original phrase, right? But let's try to make the people so they're not idiots, they become smart and wise users, right? That's what we have to do. That's a better way of trying to win the universe, right? Because the universe is going to always win as if we are using this in this approach, like trying to write better idiot-proof programs. Now, what we should try to do is to change people so they are not idiots anymore, so they just become like competent users, like wise and smart users that understand what we are doing in our software. And then we don't have the need to make our software idiot-proof or easy to use, for allowing that people to use our software, right? Another idea that might be a little bit dangerous is this idea of user-friendly. We try to be user-friendly, and this is good. I mean, it's good to have the user feel good when uses our software, but sometimes it just, it seems that like developers, we try to create something, or the developers or the people that design software, which are not the same people always, they try to just make the user happy. And yeah, that's good to have the user happy, but that doesn't guarantee that the user is correctly using the software or correctly doing GIS, right? And, I think we don't have to think about just the user, let's say just the user, the immediate user of the software, like the person that is using the mouse and the keyboard. We can consider like the user of a software is all the people connected to that, right? If there's someone creating a map, that's the user of the GIS. But then everyone that uses that map is an indirect user, right? And we should try to keep that people happy, not just the person that plays with the software, but then the people that use all the results, right? And what is the best way of doing that? It's not by making a user-friendly interface or something easy to use. It's by making an interface to guarantee that whatever is done with the GIS is good, right? It's a good map. So then everyone connected to that user, connected to that map that he's preparing, everyone will be happy because he will have a good map to use, right? We have to expand this idea of the user and then make user-friendly, but for everyone connected to the software, right? Not just try to make the user happy, right? The goal is not to create a software that satisfies the user, and especially not by making the user think that he's good enough, like that, develop this false belief that, oh, I can do that, right? It's very easy. Now I'm a GIS guru, and I just click 3 times and I get something. No, that's not like that. This is a false belief, and that is not the way to have a good GIS professional, as I was saying before. So I'll put it in another way. So the goal is to create a software that generates satisfying results, not for the user, but for everyone that uses that, right? And in a more direct way, I don't care about happy users, right? I care about sound results, right? The software has to guarantee that the results that are created with it are correct, right? Even if the user is not happy. If it's better, if the user is happy, but that's not the main goal. The main goal is to have a software that produces interesting and sound results, right? Let me show you an example of a software that is a fantastic software, but it's a good example of that I've been saying. This is a proprietary tool. This is a SRE, it's just statistical analyst. I'm not doing that on purpose. I mean, I'm going to speak bad about this, but I'm not doing it just because it's a non-open source. It's just a good example. So as you can see, this is pretty complex, and this is really powerful. This is a fantastic tool. It has a lot of tools for doing interpolation, etc. But the bad thing is that if you want to use that, you should understand everything that is in there, right? Because geostatistics, for those of you that are familiar with that, probably know that geostatistics are not easy. It's complex, right? And you need to understand everything in there. The problem in here is that this is a wizard, right? And the wizard is something that, if you think about yourself, probably everyone here knows more or less a little bit about computers. So when you install a software, wizards are for people that actually don't know much about installing software, right? Other people, you just install in a different way because it's more flexible, because you can, select more parameters, even more efficient. You can automate things. It's better. Wizard, it's for people that don't know how to do that really, right? So if you're installing software, might be fine. But if you're doing some, advanced statistical stuff, you should know what you're doing, right? You shouldn't need a wizard, right? And the problem here is that you have this kind of wizard with a next button. So basically you put your data, no matter how bad your data is, no matter how much understanding of your statistic you have, you click on next, and in the end you get a result, which is likely to be 99.9% of the time wrong, because you don't understand what is going on. But at the end you get your layer, and it's like, oh, I got some points from rainfall stations, and now I have a rainfall raster layer, which I can use for those things, right? And yeah, you get a result, but that doesn't guarantee the result is right, because there are so many parameters to adjust, and you should understand them, right? This is a good tool in the good hands, but in the bad hands, if you're someone who is not really an expert or knows something about your statistics, they can lead you to believe that you're good at that and believe that your results are good when that's not true, right? So this is the kind of thing that I would say is not the kind of software that we should create. This is not a software that makes the user become a better GIS professional, right? Just the other way. Make the user believe he's a good professional while he's not, right? We can also analyze that still from the point of view of the programmers and software designers. From the point of view of UI UX, I'm sure you're aware about that. UI, user interface, UX, the user experience, right? And I'm going to make you put you a small example. Let's think that we have a light bulb, right? And we needed an interface for that, right? We need an interface for turning on and turning off the light bulb, right? And this is an user interface, right? Let's think about that from the point of view of UI UX. Is it a good user interface? Yeah, I think it's a good one, right? It serves its purpose. You can turn on and turn off the light. That's fine. From the point of view of the user experience, is it a good user experience? Yeah, it's pretty intuitive. It's easy. It cannot be easier than that. It's very comfortable for turning on and turning off a light. So that's a good, it's good in terms of UI and UX. Now let's change the scenario. Let's think that at the other end of the button, there's not a light bulb. There's an atomic bomb, right? And let's do the same analysis. Is this a good UX? Yeah, it's a good user experience. You can drop a bomb just by doing a single click. Okay, that's pretty easy, right? Is this a good user experience, a user interface? Definitely not, right? When you're planning a user interface for a control to drop an atomic bomb, it should be a little bit more difficult to use than that, or safer to use, right? You need something more or less like that, right? And let's do the same analysis. Is this a good user interface? Yeah, it's a good interface for an atomic bomb. Is this a good user experience? No, it's terrible. You have to switch. You have to switch, one key, the lead. It's not a good user experience. It's not comfortable. It's difficult to use that. But it's a good user interface, right? So we have to make this difference and not just focus on the user interface, on having the user happy, right? And something that is easy and comfortable to use, right? You might think that I'm exaggerating a bit, like, this is about throwing an atomic bomb, right? So yeah, we are doing GIS. But then if you think about the things we do with GIS, first we do military. People do military things. You cannot drop a bomb with the GIS, but you can calculate where to drop the bomb, right? So we're doing that kind of things. But even if you're not doing that, we do a lot of things that are potentially dangerous, right? We use interpolation to get from go from rainfall data to a raster layer that then we might use to do some hydrological analysis to compute runoff, and the data from the runoff, we use that to calculate the dimensions of a dam that if it breaks, it might kill people, right? So what we're doing is not something, it's not always dangerous, but it's important. We're doing important analysis, serious analysis that might have consequences on people. And I think it's better if we have some sort of safety around our software. So, and the safety is not just by making it difficult, like in this case, but by making it, like making our software available to people that actually understand what they're doing, not to anyone that can click a next button, right? So this is more or less what we have to do, right? Here's another quote. Sorry, no, this is a quote by myself. So I just rephrased the quote. So we can rephrase the quote that I used before. Like, your software and your data are awesome, but actually they might be dangerous without knowledge, right? We need to know about what we're doing. Otherwise, we might do things that, well, they might be dangerous, right? Another quote by Rick Cook, the same as before. I would say, but it's the last, of those 3 most dangerous things, the last one is probably the most dangerous as a user with an idea, right? We have users and developers. We like to keep our users happy, and we listen to our users, and that's really good. That's really good. We don't have to create something just made by developers for developers. No. We need to target the people that are using our software, right? But sometimes users, they have bad ideas, and sometimes they propose things that are not right. They like something to be easier or more, whatever, and it's not like that. It's like, if you learn your stuff correctly, if you have the knowledge that you might have, then you don't need that to be done right. So it's good to listen to your users, but it's not so good to just believe them in everything they do or think that they're right and they know what they need, right? So that's important. And if these are the 3 most dangerous things, I would say there's one even more dangerous than that, which is not a user with an idea, and it's a user with idea and money, right? Which is basically what we call a client. And I'm saying this because it's easy to say that. Maybe it's not so easy to actually do that, but I'm sure that you all have seen users or clients that ask you to do something that doesn't make sense, right? Something that, I have this organization and I have 500 computers. Why don't you make this a little bit easier with a big button here so everyone can use this software for terrain analysis? Like, no, it's easy enough already. Like, just teach your people how to do that. No, don't make me create something so it's easier, more idiot-proof for all everyone there, right? It's easier to say that than to actually do it, but there's this quote that the client is always right. It's not. The client is not always right. The client has the money, right? That's it. And the clients with the money might ask us to do some work that maybe doesn't make sense, or maybe it's not the best thing or the best way to actually go in that direction that I was mentioning of creating a better GIS profession, right? Okay, so this is more or less about the software. Like, as a software developer, as you can see, we can do a lot of things to guide people in the right direction, to actually teach people and help them become better GIS professionals, or at least not to, to avoid putting them in the wrong direction so they believe they are good users. Well, they are not, right? What about other things in the software, like the documentation, right? How can we do that? Okay, say, let's write less documentation, right? And again, this is in a provocative way. You probably know that people complain that open source software, it's poorly documented, blah, 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 and all that. And that's true, that's true. We need to put more effort on the documentation. But we need to put effort on the kind of things that are useful, not put effort on other things. And in many cases, we're documenting things that we shouldn't be documenting, right? Or things that by documenting them that way, we are, again, putting the users and the people reading that documentation, putting them out of the correct way of learning GIS, right? So this is like the golden rule, I would say, of documentation. It looks pretty obvious, right? But the documentation explains the software. And this looks pretty obvious, but it's not. Sometimes we try to document things that are not in the software. If you think about not a GIS software, let's think about software to write, right? Something like a word processor, think of LibreOffice, OpenOffice, Microsoft Word, whatever. If you go to the help files, think about the things we do with a software like that. We write letters, we write documents, we write poems, we write short stories or novels, whatever. If you go to the documentation, it's not going to tell you anything about how to write poetry or about storytelling. You're supposed to know that. If you want to write a novel, you should know about storytelling, about how to create characters, all that kind of things. But it's not in the help. The help describes the documentation. Much in the same way, when we're documenting GIS software, we shouldn't document GIS theory, right? GIS fundamentals and ideas, and sometimes we do. This is particularly true in the case of this tool that I show you, the processing framework. All the tools and all the algorithms for analysis that we have in there, there's an ongoing fight in the community. It's like, we have to document that this way. It's like, no, not that way. I mean, we should document the software, not document all the stuff about what this means. Like, and I can go back to the example of the geostatistical analyst, right? And imagine that we have a slope algorithm in the processing toolbox or in any other software, right? And it's an algorithm that takes an elevation layer and generates an upper layer. Right? How should we document that? Well, the good thing to do is not to add anything about a slope or about formulas or stuff. It's just document the purely software stuff, right? In this case, like values must be in the same unit as the layer cell size. That is something particular of that implementation of the algorithm, right? In other cases, the algorithm might assume that the elevation is in feet or is in meter. That is something that the user, even if he's a real expert on terrain analysis, cannot figure out. So we have to document that, right? But there's no need for extra explanation. The same with the cell size. Cells are assumed to be a square. But that doesn't have to be like that. Some of the software might support raster layers with different cell sizes in the north, south, or east-west directions, right? But our software doesn't. So we document that to make sure that the user understands the limitations of the algorithm, etc. But we don't add any theoretical stuff, right? Go back to the geostatistical stuff. Maybe you've heard about this. Kriging technique is a geostatistical technique. People use it, people like it as a grade interpolator, blah, 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 but it's a complex one. You need to know stuff, right? Let's say that the same documentation, the same structure, right? The inputs for those algorithms. Well, we need points to interpolate, we need the layers to use, and then we need those parameters to give a value for range, nugget, and seal. Pretty common question that I find in the mailing list or stuff about this is, what does that mean? That should be documented, range, nugget, and seal, right? No, if you don't understand what that is, that means that you have zero knowledge of geostatistics or Kriging. Then you're not in the possession to use that algorithm. You need to study more, not now, but you need maybe weeks or months to understand. This is a complex technique, right? And if I explain that to you in the documentation, you're not going to understand everything that you need to understand about geostatistics and interpolation, right? So I don't believe that has to be documented. And if we go back to the case of the S3 documentation, the geostatistical analyst, you have seen something like this. This documentation is good, like, really well formatted, really well written. But in the end, how Kriging works, that is like 2-3 pages of text, not more than that. What happens? You go there, and this is more like a tips and tricks for, I get just the minimum information to know what I have to enter in one of the fields, not really understand what is going on. And I believe that now I know about Kriging, and this is absolutely not true, right? If you just read that, you basically have a little trick to use the software, but you don't understand what you're doing. What do we have to do? That means we don't have to document at all? Yeah, we have to document the software. We have to document the software things, right? Like the things that are of the software itself. And then for the theory, we don't have to document. We have to put people towards something like that. This is what they need, not 2 pages in a help file. You read the book like that, you learn, and then you go to the software. And the issues with the software, the particular stuff of the software, that is documented in the help, right? This is the good way of having a good user to understand the interpolation is doing, and that in the end guarantees that the result that he's getting from that interpolation is going to be correct, right? I know it's not the easy way. It's easier to read 1 page and believe that you know everything than read 400 pages, right? But I believe that this is what we should try to do if we're trying to educate people through our software or through the documentation of the software in this case, right? Another thing that we do is just not, in the community, not the software, not the documentation, but this interaction that we do, mailing lists, forums, we help other people. What do I propose? Let's not help so much on the forums. Again, this is in a provocative way. I'm not saying that we should not help. We should help. This is really useful. But we should think about, just in the case of documentation, we should think a little bit better about what we do, right? How we try to help people, the advice that we provide on a forum or in a mailing list. And just like I had the golden rule I said in the case of documentation, right? The documentation is about the software. Well, the software mailing lists are about the software. And I think we should discuss the software stuff, right? Not start discussing other things, because we end up in shallow discussions about the geostatistics algorithms or things like that. But in the end, we are not helping other people, right? A typical thing that we see, and this is, this is normal because we're like that, not people, but someone comes to the help of some software, like in this case, let's say this Kriging algorithm. Oh, it's not documented, and I don't understand what this is, right? Let's go to mailing lists. Hey, I'm using this algorithm. can anyone help me? I don't understand the meaning of range, nugget, and sil. What's that? And maybe no one answers. Maybe someone correctly says, like I'm saying here, if you don't understand that, why don't you try a simpler interpolation algorithm, or read about kriging, then come back, right? That's like the correct kind of answer, like putting that person in the correct direction so he or she can learn from a book or whatever. But then there's always someone who says, oh, I used that algorithm. I was in the same case as you 1 month ago. I entered value 0, 1, and 2, and it worked. Oh, and that other person goes there, tries, the software works, you end up having a raster layer, and you think that is correct, right? That is not a way of helping people. You give like a minor trick to make the software work, but you're not actually making people understand what they're doing, right? So this is, it's good to be, have yourself, help someone and see yourself, so others see yourself in the community helping other people, right? But let's provide useful advice, like sound advice, not just tricks like that, but, let's provide advice that actually make people advance towards being like, better GIS professionals, right? Another thing that's important to know is this, beware of gamification. I'm sure that you know that. Platforms like Stack Exchange, there's GIS.Stack Exchange, sort of forum kind of thing. You post questions, people reply, and you get points and you get badges, like the silver badge and the golden badge, right? So it's good because you believe it's a game, right? And there's the idea of the gamification, and you play the game more, right? People answer more in that kind of platform that if you don't get anything, right? If it's just replying. But that is somehow dangerous because people see a question, and maybe a question that they would not answer to in a normal case, but just to get some extra point. Oh yeah, I know how to do that, and they provide very poor responses in many cases, just to because they think that the main goal of that is to get points, right? And it's not. The main goal is to help other people, to provide good advice, and then you get points, and that makes it more fun, and then can make it better, right? And this is not something that my personal opinion. It's well-known fact that people try to get more points in this gamification stuff, and then just try to reply where they should not be replying. And that there are mechanisms then to downvote replies, so they are marked as incorrect. But we all know that some users, if they are desperate about trying to do something, they might try even the wrong replies. Oh yeah, let's try this, and it might work. Oh, it worked for me, even if it's wrong, right? Even if it leads you in the wrong direction, right? So beware of that, and just like I say, let's work on mailing lists. Let's collaborate with people in forums, but let's do it the right way. Just like providing sound advice, and if not, better to collaborate less on this, right? So as a summary of all that I've been saying, I think that we have to make the difference between users and professionals, right? So I'm not saying we have to create better GIS users. Like what a user is someone that actually just can use the software, plays with the software or a computer, right? I think we should focus, or our goal should be to create better GIS professionals, which is someone who understands what it's doing, not just a user. The idea of a user is vague, and it's not per se good, right? To have a good user, we should try to get good professionals, actually people that understand, and hopefully with this small ideas that I've been describing here, we can go in that direction. And the other one is I've said me versus the others. We usually try to that user or that person that is using the software, we try to make him or her feel good about that. Like, I know what I'm doing. It's me. I'm a good professional. And it's not like that. It shouldn't be yourself who confirms that you are a good professional. It's everyone around you, right? The others, right? So as I was saying about the case of the map, it's not that you have to be happy with the map you create. The people around you that see that map, that uses that map, they have to be correct. They have to be happy with that. So they are the ones that actually give you that label of being a GIS professional, right? So this is where we try to focus, not just to keep our users happy, make them believe that they know how to use the software, or they understand that, not themselves, but the others, right? To try to create good professionals that make other people happy with their work, right? So this is what I think that we should try to do, and I say doing that by Of course, writing books or doing training, but also through all the things that we do in the community. Developing software, writing documentation, or participating in forums and mailing lists, all the things that I've been saying. I think this is what we have to do, and hopefully we will have better GIS professionals and a better GIS community, which is it has more knowledge and it's better prepared to solve the problems that we do in GIS. Thank you.
Thank you, Vitor. Thank you very much. We have time for 2 or 3 questions. Not from users, just from professionals. Yes, Maria. Rui, can you come here?
Hi. This is not a question from me, but from Twitter, because I have been tweeting, and people are a bit, they don't understand the talk because they haven't seen it, but they made a good question. If we start doing the user interfaces more complex, that may scare users to start using our software and may go to another software that maybe it's not open source, or maybe it's... So how do you see this balancing? Maybe we should try to document a lot the easy functionality and then leave like a hole for the complex?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Yeah, definitely. We do. I mean, I wasn't saying like we have to do software that's difficult to use, just not have that as the main goal, right? But in the end, if we end up having software that is more difficult to use, that let's say a proprietary solution that doesn't share these ideas and is trying to just, make it like very, very easy. Yeah, and it's like users are probably going to move. But as I said, we are not just working on, the way of the tools that we have to teach our users or make them learn is not just the software. So at the same time, we should teach them maybe teach them that the easiest solution is not the best one, right? So to avoid them going to that way, so let's not just teach them GIS, but teach them that complexity in some cases is needed, or that having a very easy wizard that goes next is not per se a good thing. So I guess that's like the way probably we can do that. But that's true. People are lazy. People just have they have tight schedules, or they need something that they don't have to study anything. Just go click and get some results. So the world is more complex than that. But I don't see a way of that. Ideally, like both the proprietary software and the open source software and all the software should focus that, and let's try not to create that kind of software that gives you false belief that you understand how things work. But that's not going to happen. That's being too naive. But yeah.
Great presentation, Victor. Thank you. In the past, a proprietary software vendor had 3 versions of their product. And one of them enabled you to make a simple map and do some stuff with the map. And then the next one and the next one unlocked more complex functionality. And I absolutely agree with you that we need to have better professionals, and when you're doing complex stuff, you need to understand the theory behind that stuff before you start using the tools. But at the other end of the spectrum, we've got 1 million people using a desktop product that we've produced, and probably 950,000 of them are doing fairly simple things with that product. And somehow we need to find a way, maybe by having an advanced version, or maybe by having everything in one package but with different interfaces that you unlock as you know what you're doing. Because these 950,000 users who are using our product to make maps, some of them are making some really good maps with that. You know, if what you need to do is visualize 4 layers of data and then do some beautiful cartography on that, then maybe you can do that without understanding geostatistics and kriging.
Right, yeah, I mean, I like that idea of having, like, you know, different versions like that, but for example, in the case, I don't know exactly how to put that, but in the case you were saying, like, creating beautiful maps, right? Let's say you get a software like QGIS, and it's kind of easy to do the symbology. The interface is pretty good, but it doesn't have, like, let's say, extra functionality to help you pick up colors, right, for instance, right? So this is a question that I usually like to do when I do some presentations, like, how many people here has created a map? And everyone says me. I was like, how many people here has read a book about cartography, about selecting colors, about what is a visual variable? And it's not even half of the people does that, right? So this is the kind of thing that, okay, the interface per se, it's easy, right? It's like, you know, it has to be easy, like creating the symbology. But if we try to make it easier, like, you know, by default, it generates some, you know, it picks up the colors and makes it, that's not a good way, because anyone that tries to create a map should at least have some knowledge of how to create a map, right? How to, you know, the visual variables, like visual language and symbology and all that. Most of the people don't have that. So some things are easy, like they are, because they cannot be really complex, like the symbology, but we shouldn't try to make them even simpler or even more comfortable to use, just because some people might feel better. Which is like, we should guarantee, and I don't know how to do that, but we should guarantee that anyone that tries to open a raster or a vector layer and set a symbology, which is super simple, anyone doing that should have some background on cartography and how to do that. That's my ideal situation, right? Because otherwise, it's pretty easy to just, you know, open a layer, colors, and you start picking up colors, and then in the end, you might end up with someone that is, yeah, it looks great, but it's not so great from the point of view of cartography. So, you know, in general, like, the idea is to try to force people, or at least, like, help people to get more knowledge, to read more, to learn more, and try to do it with the software, but definitely it's not going to be possible all the time, right? So.
Another question concerning your documentation was, it's a bit misleading from my viewpoint what you described, because what you were describing was more about not mixing user manual with other documentation. So I'm wrong when I say this, because you were describing input, output, or whatever, but you were saying I don't want to describe the in and out behind the button, so the theory. So
yeah, just describe
but in fact,
the software stuff. Right?
What you would describe as documentation is not documentation, is only a subset of documentation, the user manual of the software.
I don't understand the question. So, I mean, what I was saying is that the documentation or user manual should be about the software, right? Not tell you things that, like in the case I was just saying for the question that Stephen made, like, you have to describe the symbology thing, everything in detail, but you shouldn't add any stuff in there about how to make a group map, right? About visual variables, about visual language, about all that. That doesn't belong in there. You're assumed to know that already.
Yes, but it's documentation, but outside the software scope. The software usage scope itself.
Right, yes, it's the documentation outside of the usage. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Sorry,
Okay.
there's a question there.
Presentation. I just had a small comment. I was a bit concerned when you said that we should help people less on forums. And, you know, I'm speaking from perspective of a person whose daily bread is going through Stack Overflow, GitHub, and Google Groups in search of examples or advice. And you would be surprised how much of my knowledge comes from very small comments that just fill, you know, like small gap in my knowledge. And I get an idea how things work and how they were designed. So I'd like to finish this with a quote I heard from one British researcher whose name I cannot remember, but he said, "Your noise is my signal." Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not that I was saying like you should help less. You should help more if you can, but not try to help just because you want to help. You were saying like, a lot of your knowledge come from small comments. And that's good, because those small comments, if they made you learn, those are good. What I'm saying is, like, let's keep those comments, those small advices, because they are useful. Let's not do other advices that we just do to get points on a gamificated platform, things like that, you know, like the example that I was saying, like people say, hey, I cannot use that, oh, put that value and it will work. You can see a lot of things like that in GIS, in something like the Stack Exchange. You can see a lot of comments like that. It's like, those might be small or might be long, but they're not useful, they're not correct. What I was suggesting is to just keep the useful ones, like the ones that you say you've learned from. Keep those ones. Like, let's try to keep to help more, of course. We have to help more the people in the forums and mailing lists, but with good advice, with advice that is useful and that helps you. You know, by reading those little comments, you have become a better GIS professional. But someone reading bad advice might not become a GIS professional, might become someone that thinks that is a good user, but in the end does understand what it's doing, right? So that's the thing that I was saying. Let's try to avoid that. Right?
The last question. Sorry.
Thank you, Victor, for your great presentation. I think you made some very good advice, some very valuable advice. But as we talked in other keynotes also, OSGeo is a community, and there are different perspectives and different groups. So it's an ecosystem. And you gave the advice from the perspective of developers. And I think this is very valuable. I think the opportunity is that in the community there are other people that could focus on other things. And if I may summarize your keynote in one sentence, it should be focus on your strengths and do it from your perspective. And together we can create great software and we can create great documentation. We can help people to become GIS experts if they want. And we can do that by providing with open programs, educational programs. We have Geo for All to do that. So if everybody focuses on his strengths and we understand each other, then we can together create great things. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good, like what you're saying, like focus on what you know really well and, you know, help on that. That's part of what I was saying. Like, if you know something, you know, if your knowledge about something is shallow and you don't really understand that, don't try to help other people with that, or don't try to document that because you might think it's useful for you that you're not someone who knows this really well, right? If you know the software really well, document the software, but don't document other stuff, even if you know that, because you can assume that other people are going to know that. So definitely, I mean, if you, whatever you do, do it with, you know, with knowledge, right? If you're a developer and helping other developers, you know, help them because you know that, but if you don't know the software, how it's used, don't help them on that, right? So yeah, I clearly agree with what you say. Cool, so thank you.
That was an excellent way to finish this session. Thank you once more, Victor. So we have 5 minutes to stand up, to move to the other room. Another session will start in the other room. And Ivan will be here, but we have 5 minutes to